Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us today in this EOSC-hub webinar. We will now start the presentation. Today, the webinar is focusing on the getting access to services in the EOSC portal, the user and provider perspectives. Our speaker is Deborah Testi from Cineca. I will give you some preliminary information about the webinar and a very short introduction about the EOSC-hub projects for the ones who are not familiar yet with it. And then I will leave the floor to Deborah to introduce the contents of today's presentation. Thanks. Next slide, please. So this webinar, This webinar will be first of all recorded and the recording will be available on our EOSC-hub website. And also it will be available for a long time, so you can access them and you will be able to view this recording. The slides together with the recordings will be published in the EOSC-hub webinars page. Please keep your questions until the end. We will give you the floor, but with the for questions that will be conducted by either raising your hand through the Zoom functionality, and possibly if you can still start to add it into the Q&A or in the chat, we will take them into account and we'll leave the floor at the end for the questions. So as introduction to the EOSC-hub, EOSC-hub project is a huge project with a total budget of more than 30 million euros, with more than 100 partners and 150 persons involved in the project. The coordinator is Stichting EGI. The project is almost going into its end. It has started in January 2018 and the final deadline is December 2020, while it will be a little bit extended until March 2021 due to COVID reasons, of course. In the project, which has as a main aim to deliver this set of services and integration and management system for the European Open Science Cloud to act as a European level entry point for all kinds of potential users and stakeholders, has included more than 20 digital research infrastructures, which includes, of course, EGI, but also UDAT and Indigo Data Cloud, for example, offering together services, software, and data for the data-driven research and innovation purposes. Next slide, please. The main activity areas of this project are four. First of all, it's focusing on offering services through the portal, baseline services, and also applications and tools, a set of training and consultancy services and data. Then also is the hub is the way where we are basically exploiting federation services to our stakeholders through the EOSC portal and marketplace, which will very well focus on the presentation of the webinar today. And also a set of other federation services such as an help desk system, an authentication, authorization, identity service management, and accounting and monitoring services. Then there are also some processes and policies on which the EOSC-hub project focuses, such as security regulations, of course, the implementation of the fair data principles, and compliance to the main European and international standard systems. And finally, federated operations in the sense of customer relationship management services, certification of providers, service level agreement negotiations, and so on. Next slide, please. Today, we will focus mainly on the EOSC portal services available in the EOSC portal. And of course, this is relevant as an introduction also for the services that will be provided by EOSC-hub and how they can be integrated standard services into the EOSC-hub. I will then leave the floor to Deborah Testi from Cineca to start the webinar, focusing on the more details of this webinar. Thanks.
Thanks, Francesca, for the nice introduction to the project and to this presentation. So as mentioned, this presentation will focus on the services that are provided via the EOSC marketplace, and how user and providers can provide access to their services. I am from Cineca, as Francesca already mentioned, but in particular in EOSC-hub, I'm leading the team dealing with order management. So we are dealing with the process of giving access to users to the service onboarded into to the portal. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is a brief outline of what I will present today. So first of all, a very quick introduction on the EOS portal and the marketplace, on the different ways user can access to the services that are available into the portal, and what is expected from the service provider depending on the different type of access. Then I will provide also some brief statistics on the service access so far. Next slide, please. So as already mentioned by Francesca, so the purpose of the EOS portal and the EOS marketplace is to streamline the access to the set of services that are onboarded into the portal, and to facilitate the building of interdisciplinary workflows through using different services and different resources also from different providers. So the EOS portal, you probably all know how to access it, and there are the portal exposes all the list of services that can be filtered by type or by provider to select what is of interest for the user. Next slide, please. So I will not go into the detail on how to make services available through the EOS marketplace, as this was already covered into a previous webinar. As mentioned by Francesca, if you are interested in going back to this information, you have both the slide and the recording into the webinar page on the EOSC-hub website, so you can go back to that. So what I will focus today is which different type of access a provider can give to user via the marketplace, and how this changes the way to access the service both from the user perspective and what this entails for the providers for different cases. Next slide, please. So, EOSC-hub and the EOS marketplace has provided an access control system as part of the marketplace, which is a component of the EOS portal. So basically, when a new service is registered, the provider has to let the marketplace know which level of integration with this access control system is for the service. So basically, the provider can choose between 3 different options, which is the service is open access. The service can be orderable via the provider and the provider's channel, whatever it is, or it can be orderable via EOSC-hub. Next slide, please. So I will now briefly describe each of these type of access. So open access service, we mean any service that where the user does not need any approval to access the service. So this might be a user service where there is no need to log in, so it's available to anyone, but also services where the user might need to log in, but there is basically no specific formality or interaction with the provider to grant access to the user. So in this case, as you can see in the slide, the EOS marketplace will simply show a button after the service is selected, which will say go to the service web page. If you can click, there is an animation, I hope so. Okay, so when the user clicks on the button, it is simply redirected to the service web page, and then the user can interact with the service. And the EOSC-hub will not intervene into the process. Next slide, please. So a very similar path from the user's perspective is for the services that are orderable via the provider channel. In this case, means that the user needs to request in some way to access the service, maybe providing why they need to use the service, to which purpose, or which type of characteristics they want for the service. But this is managed by the provider own channels. So also in this case, the marketplace will provide a button to be redirected to the provider website, and then the user will follow the standard procedure that the provider has put in place for his own service. Next slide, please. So the last possibility is to have the service orderable via the EOSC channel. So in this case, in the end, the request will be forwarded to the provider, and the provider will have the final responsibility of responding to the user request. But the EOSC-hub team, and in the future other project team, will take care of managing the workflow and have a first interaction with the user. In this case, the user will also be able to build a workflow, putting together different services together. And also in this case, the team can provide support in understanding how this can be done or at the level of the integration. So in this case, the EOS concept can reach its full potential by putting together a different type of service from different providers. Next slide, please. So what this changed from the user perspective? So when the service is selected, can you please click? There should be also, okay. The user is asked to provide some information. These obviously are different from service to service. This is just an example on the type of resources, for example, needed, or for which purpose the request is needed. Via the EOS portal, the user can also interact with the EOS-hub team to ask information, or the EOS-hub team can request additional information if needed. So there is also a communication channel in place in the marketplace. Next, please. And as mentioned, the user can put together different services into the same request and also discuss possible integration purposes. Next slide. So how this works from the EOSC-hub perspective. So there is an order management team on which we have shifters on duty every 2 weeks, which take care of a first check of the orders incoming. So, for example, removing any spam request or asking additional information if the request is incomplete or incorrect. So that or if the combination of requested services does not seem really coherent. So in these cases, we get back to the user asking for clarification before contacting the provider. So once these requests are checked and clean, then they are forwarded to the provider. Again, when the service is onboarded using this option of access, the provider is also asked to provide what is called service order target, which is to which email address this request will be forwarded. And this will be, this is an example, what you see here is an example of the communication that the provider will receive. So it will arrive from a tool which is called SOMBO, which is Service Order Management Back Office. And there will be a link to all the information of the service. Next, please. So the link will contain, for example, all the information on the user that is making the request, and all the details that have been provided by the user through the comments, and all the information related to the service request. So one important thing to mention is also in this case, there is the possibility to exchange messages, and these messages are between the provider and the order management team. So these messages are not to the users. If the provider wants to contact the user, the contact email is into the form. So the provider is free to contact the user in any specific way or preferred channel they want to use. Next one, please. So one important point is that in this form, there is also a request for the provider where we ask to confirm or to reject the request after you have the provider has investigated with the user or understood if this request can be served. This is for the order management team to be able to change the status of the request, which is also visible from the user into the marketplace to coherently with what has been served or decided by the service provider. So for the moment, there is no specific time limit by which the provider has to give feedback on the request. But as a service order management team, we from time to time send periodic reminders in case the request is still pending, just to make sure that the request has arrived to the provider and that the request has been taken care of. Next slide, please. So here are some statistics. So of the services that are currently onboarded into the EOSC Portal and Marketplace, we have about most of them are open access or dealt by the service provider. Let's say a quarter of them are now managed via the EOSC-hub order management system. This is the current, I mean, like yesterday, situation of the status of the different orders we have into the received so far. So you see that most of them have been approved or are ready for the user to be used. We have quite some of them that are rejected. This is mainly happening when the request for the user by the user was unclear, or they were just testing the system, but they were not really willing to then make use of the services. So there are very different cases in the rejected part. And then we have some in progress and some waiting for response. Either the waiting for response can be either from the user or from the provider. So we are waiting for some feedback. Next slide. So these are, we have now about 360 something orders arrived into the, from the marketplace to EOSC-hub. And this is the, on the left side is the number of orders received per month. So we have some very busy months and some are more quiet. And on the right side, you can see the time that it has been taken to give a first reply to the order. As you can see, there has been in the beginning some peaks of time. This because the workflow that I just described took some time to be clean up and have all the procedure right in place, so that also the shifter knew very well what to do with each order. But we have worked a lot on improving the workflow and also in building this back office system so that now the response time is normally within a couple of days time. So is really improving. Please also consider that this for like 1/3 of these orders, we need some interaction with the users. So this requires some time to get reply and to reply back and so on. So there is also this time to take into consideration. Next slide, please. So what we are doing now, so we continue to try to streamline this workflow for order management, trying to make it easier for both for user and for providers to interact with it. What we feel is still to improve is to improve the communication with the service provider on the orders, also on the way to provide feedbacks on the status of the order request, and maybe to create some more channel for the provider to contact the user and vice versa without having all the time to pass through the order management system. But this is work in progress, something we are looking at, and we hope to be implemented in the next period. Next slide. So just for your information, if you are a service provider, we have a service provider documentation page on the wiki, which provides you a lot of links with a lot of specific documents, but in particular, you might be interested into the service provider operation handbook, which is specifically written for providers who have already onboarded service into the EOS portal. And there are information both on the management of orders, but also, for example, on the support and the help desk, on how to collect customer satisfaction and other points that might be of interest for service providers. So in case you have interest in it, you can have a look at this document. Next slide, but I think I gave all the information I had so far. I kept it quite brief because I think it's more interesting to hear your question and provide information you might be interested in on this topic.
Thanks a lot, Deborah, for this very interesting and insightful presentation. We will now open the floor to our participants for questions. You can either write them in the Q&A or in the chat. Don't be shy. I don't see any yet. You can either raise your hand. So Paul Wintersteller is raising his head. Diego, can you give him the possibility to speak?
Hi.
Hi, Paul. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Yes, I'm participating in the NEAS project. And I wonder if we have, if that goes the same way with our services once they are ready to be deployed, or is there any special agreements or any unspoken or spoken agreements between the NEAS project and the EOSC-hub regarding implementing the services? Do you know something about it?
No, honestly, no. I do not know of any specific agreement for your services. So I'm sorry, I'm not sure I have the information to answer to your question. But I mean, I think all of the services follow more or less within what I described, depending on the different option you choose for giving access to the service. Then I don't know if you have a specific requirement that will need specific discussion with the EOSC-hub. Sorry, I'm not involved in this discussion, so I do not know honestly.
Then maybe I have another question.
Yeah,
sure.
Regarding the open services.
Yeah.
Are they hosted somewhere on a EU portal, or is the provider responsible for hosting the services somewhere on a private portal?
Okay, I honestly haven't checked all of them, but I think that most all of them are hosted at the provider infrastructure, and so what is provided via the EOS portal is the link, let's say, and the possibility to give visibility to the service through the marketplace. But then I do not know if there is any specific open access service that has used some EOSC-related infrastructure to provide the open access services. As far as I know, all of them are provided by the provider infrastructure.
Okay.
Thanks, Paul, for the question, and Deborah for the answer. Any other attendee? Baptiste, Ciccone? You should be able to talk now.
Yes. Hello. So I'm Baptiste Cecconi. Yes, we've been talking recently, Deborah. And yes, I wanted to ask a question about how you you plan to maybe improve the way the interaction between the user who's asking for a service and the service provider. In the case we are talking about in these days with Deborah, well, it's been almost a year and a half that it started up, and there was some lot of delays because I didn't receive some information and we didn't receive others. So I don't know if there is any plan to try to improve the process or if it is already improved, and that's why we are talking now.
Okay, in some part, I have to say from the first interaction we had with you, it has already improved. Because at the very beginning, obviously, as all the new thing, the procedure, you test the procedure when you start interacting with real user and real providers, and then we discovered that there were some bottlenecks or some issues that we didn't tackle so well. So first of all, we worked on the workflow, which really improved a lot the communication, but we still feel that there are room for improvement. So that's why I mentioned at the end that we are still working on this. Also because we received some feedback from users that they expect into the EOS portal to be able to leave messages directly to the providers and not just to the order management team. So we are thinking now on how to make this possible communication efficient and also usable from the user perspective and meaningful from the provider side. So, but we are still working on this. So this part is still work in progress, but we hope to release something by the end of the project.
Okay, I have another question, if it's possible.
Yeah, yes.
It's a question about, it's probably a more technical question, but it's a question about how the user are authenticated on the portal. So it's not maybe exactly what you were talking about, but I have two different sets of projects with two different AAIs because it's two frameworks. And it's very difficult to switch from an authentication to another. I have to close everything, remove all the cookies and start again every time. And there is no logout button that can allow me to relog through another authentication framework. So is this something that is planned or maybe it's difficult to implement? I don't know.
Oh, I'm not so fully expert on the current version of the authentication mechanism into the EOS portal. So I use it, but I do not know the technical backgrounds of it. But I think I can forward this this question to the team in EOSC-hub so that we can let you know what is the technical problem with that or which might be the solution. So I'm happy to forward this to the colleagues in the project to help you on that.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Baptiste and Deborah. Any other question to Deborah? Let me see in the Q&A. Now I don't see questions. Any other attendees who would like to talk with us today? I think Baptiste.
Yes, since
Yeah,
I
okay.
have time, so let's ask
Sure.
another question.
Sure.
It's difficult to know from the portal, and it's not an easy question or an easy answer. Is when you well, all the interactions that I had with the providers. So in the end, there is a way to provide me with the service. But the question on what would be the cost of the service after the first period of time where EOSC-hub is funded is always unclear. So it is impossible to know at the moment, and there is nothing on the portal that tells that a service may have some cost associated
may
to it at
become
some
pay per
point.
use at some point. Yeah. Yeah, this is a very important point indeed. So it was not covered by presentation because it is more on the offering perspective from the service provider. But so the idea is that the service provider should be able now to specify different offers for the service. Let's say that you might have a service that up a certain limit or for certain kind of user is free, and maybe for other is to be discussed or maybe pay per use. So we had in the last months added this functionality into the marketplace. But this was also noted that we need to start working on providing information on the longer term. So what will happen after a certain period of time. And this should be in theory described in this offer field. This was not unfortunately available from the beginning, so not all the service have now this information into the portal, but they are going through a request for update to all the service providers. So we hope that this will be more complete in the near future. Hope I have answered your question, Baptiste.
Yes, thanks.
Thank you. Let me see if any other attendees would like to raise some more questions. No? Any other question? No. Okay. So thanks a lot for joining this very interesting webinar today. And the next one will be on 10th of November, and it will be focusing on using compute using compute services in EOSC, experiences and advices from EOSC-hub. Will be still at 2 p.m. So if you're interested, please register to the webinar through our website. And thanks again, and I hope to see you all in the next upcoming webinar. Thanks a lot to Deborah for the nice presentation.
It
Have a
was
nice
my
day.
pleasure. Have a nice day.
Bye-bye.